Let's look at this growing pressure on former President Goodluck Jonathan to contest the 2027 presidential election. Remember that Jonathan himself have in the recent time increased his public engagement, seeing him meeting with ADC ESCOs, meeting with Atiku, meeting with P2B, and as we have it, Jerry Ghana have made it clear recently that Jonathan will certainly contest the 2027 presidential election. And we have seen a recent development. Of course, this one coming from the Punch newspaper. Let me bring you up to speed with what Punch is talking about, sequel to Jonathan's ambition. It says 2027, Jonathan weighs ADC option amid comeback reports. Going forward, they say former President Goodluck Jonathan is said to be considering aligning with the African Democratic Congress ahead of the 2027 general elections, as the party's coalition of opposition forces gathers strength and intensifies consultations with key political stakeholders across the country. Multiple sources of the ADC National Working Committee, who spoke on condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to discuss the matter publicly, confirmed to Sunday Punch that former president was considering the platform. Let me quickly say that there are so many angles to a Jonathan ambition, both legal angle and, of course, different angle, political and all of that. There's a school of thought. I think the current Minister of Aeroplane and Aviation is in the league of that school of thought that believe that a Jonathan may have challenge because of a law that was signed in 2018 by former President, of course, Buhari, that bars anyone who have been sworn in twice to contest election again. But again, I'll quickly bring you up to speed with what Keyamo said before we go further into this conversation. Of course, this one is from Vanguard. It says 2027, Keyamo wants PDP against feeding Jonathan Obi. But let me bring you the part that he specifically made mention of the legal issue. Okay, now it says that Keyamo argued that nominating Jonathan carries a constitutional danger tied to Section 137, subsection 3 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, which he suggested could bar anyone sworn in twice as president from contesting again. I want to say that this law was signed in, this bill was signed into law under the former president, of course, Muhammadu Buhari. But again, there's another school of thought that has argued that the law Muhammadu Buhari signed in that bars anyone from contesting twice, from contesting more than once, having completed the tenure of his principal who may have died in office, just as the case of Jonathan. Another school of thought is saying that that law, of course, the Nigerian law do not operate retroactively. That a Jonathan case was already in force before that law was enacted. That Jonathan will be exempted from effect of that law. But again, I will bring you up to speed with what the school of thought is talking about that, because we understand that according to that school of thought, they are citing Section 4, Section 9 of 1999 Constitution as amended, that says, this section explicitly states that the National Assembly or House of Assembly cannot create a law with retrospective effect for any criminal offense. Though this section specifically mentions criminal offense, but those in this proponent are saying that it is applicable in Jonathan's case. And they equally argue that the only instance where laws in Nigeria can operate retroactively or retrospectively, as the case may be, is either in the area of procedural law or if it is expressly stated. But that in the case of Jonathan, that it was not expressly stated that the issue will affect Jonathan. Hence, in Jonathan's case, was already on ground before that law was enacted. But another school of thought has equally brought up another big issue. This time around, regarding a judgment of Court of Competent Jurisdiction that was delivered in Yonagwa before the 2023 presidential election. Let me bring you up to speed with what that court said about Jonathan's eligibility to contest in the light of that law that bars someone from contesting more than once after he may have completed the tenure of his dead principal. So this one is from Punch as well. It says, court clears Jonathan to contest presidency. You go further to say that the Federal High Court sitting in Yonagwa, Bayelsa State, has ruled that the former president, Dr. Goodluck Jonathan, is eligible to contest the 2023 presidential election. The presiding judge, Justice Issa Hammer Dashin, gave the judgment on Friday in a suit marked FHC/YNG/CS/86/2022. He also heard that Jonathan's right to fight for the office of president again cannot stop by any retroactive law. I think this issue of retroactive is featured again. So that is for that school of thought. But on the political angle, some people have argued that a Jonathan should not throw himself into the ring. Because according to that school of thought, that a Jonathan is trying to be used by some local elements to truncate the chance of the South. Because that school of thought believe that if a Jonathan go to pick the ticket of PDP, that certainly an article will run under ADC, and that it will deplete the chance of the South to win the election. That is for that school of thought. But another school of thought is equally saying that even the current president, talking about Senator Amebola Tinubu, was in the vanguard that truncated the re-election of Jonathan in 2015, a fellow Southerner. That as such, that Tinubu is not justified to start talking about a Southern turn as with respect to discouraging a Jonathan to contest. But in all of this, I think what is becoming increasingly factual, evident, is that a Jonathan himself may have decided to contest. Considering his recent public engagements, considering the fact that he have even himself met with the ADC ESCO, considering that he have met with the former vice president Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, considering the fact that he have equally met with Obi himself, and from what we are getting, the feelers out there is that a Jonathan will not contest except he extract commitment from the likes of Atiku, from the likes of perhaps Obi, that they will not be on the ballot, so that he will be fronted as the opposition figure candidates. But in all of this, we understand that the APC have, of course, I think APC in Lagos State have advised that they should allow Jonathan to retire in peace. And as we have it, Jonathan have not actually come up publicly to make his position known. But his body language, the body language of his close associates has spoken loudly about his intention to contest. So it is not until he come out openly to make his intention known, those who are around there, who are close to him, their statements clearly suggest that he is going to contest the election. More likely, because even recently we have seen even the son of Erfai, who of course, who was a very serious critic of Jonathan during Jonathan's presidency, came out clearly to say that even in one of the days that the father was going to meet with Jonathan, that he pleaded with the father to help him plead and apologize on his behalf before Jonathan. Because according to him, that he was naive when he criticized Jonathan in the past. But now that he have realized that Jonathan is not who he thought he was. But the question is, we understand that Tinubu is certainly going to contest. There's no argument about that. And of course, we are in a country where there is often what you call power of incumbency. That makes it very difficult, extremely difficult, to defeat the man in the saddle. I think Jonathan is perhaps the first sitting president that was defeated in Nigeria. And I think that best explains the reason APC is full of confidence that if they could defeat Jonathan as a sitting president, that defeating him as, of course, a candidate of another political party would not be a difficult task. But however I look at it, I think Once, if the court clears Jonathan that he's eligible to contest, now the decision to determine who govern the country will now rest with the electorates. We are not that one thing is certain. If Jonathan decides to contest, that his eligibility must be tested in court. That is for certain. Because some other school of thought is arguing that hence there was that judgment that was delivered before 2023 presidential election that cleared Jonathan to contest. That if someone now goes to court to challenge his eligibility on the basis of that judgment, that it is already status bar. Hence, the appeal or no one appeal the judgment within the timeline allowed by law. But the question is, even if a Jonathan is clear to contest, a Tinubu is contesting, and perhaps an Obi is contesting, and Atiku is contesting, ultimately, the right to choose who govern Nigeria lies with the electorates. That is where we come to how we can make our election free, fair, and credible. Because as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter who win the election, so long as the person is from the southern part of the country, because I believe that the South should be given an opportunity to complete their 8 years. But the question is, how do you now have a free, fair, and credible election? That takes us to the shortcoming of our Electoral Acts. Particularly section 82 that deals with the mode of transmission of election results. But we understand that before the 2023 presidential election, stakeholders put pressure on National Assembly that demanded the responsibility to amend the Electoral Act. And as we have it, before the election, the Electoral Act was amended to the extent that INEC was given the liberty, the discretionary power to determine the mode of transmission of election results. And today, INEC carries that power to determine how to transmit election results. But as we have it, before the 2023 presidential election, when INEC will come out with their guideline, they said that they were going to transmit election results electronically. But at the nick of time, they reneged. And as we have it, that formed the basis for upon which PDP and its then candidate, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, and Labour Party and its then candidate of Kopi to be challenged the election result of 2023 to up to Supreme Court. But as we have it, in the wisdom of Supreme Court, they are still legitimize the election of Senator Ahmed Bola Tinubu as the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And we are likely going to the same into 2027 presidential election with the same Electoral Act. I would say that if we go into the election with that same Electoral Act, that Electoral Act is susceptible to manipulation. And we may come back to start singing the same song. That is why the most important thing to do is to have a robust election that is devoid of human interference. Because I understand that the average Nigerian politician, once there's a lacuna, they will always lash on it to compromise the process. That is why if you want to have free, fair, and credible election, you must address all the lacuna that exists in the electoral process. I think that will explain the reason we recently saw European election monitoring team, who of course monitored the 2020 presidential election, as a way of follow up, coming to Nigeria to meet with the umpire, talking about INEC, as they prepare for the 2027 presidential election. And as we have it, the current INEC chairman, talking about Mahmoud, his tenure is ending by December, having completed his mandatory 2 term as required by law. And as we have it, the INEC will be getting a brand new chairman. So I think all eyes will be on INEC and the process leading to the appointment of a new INEC chairman. Go understand that the president will soon convene a Council of State meeting where you have the likes of all former head of states, all former presidents, all former Attorney General of the all former Chief Justice of the Federation, the current Attorney General of the Federation, all 7 governors. Of course, they are members. I understand that the president serves as the chairman and the vice president as the vice chairman of that Council of State. But if you look at what the Constitution says, the Constitution only gives them advisory role, meaning they can only advise the president on who to appoint, how to go about the appointment. They cannot, of course, pinpoint or handpick a particular candidate and enforce it on the president. So in all of this, it goes to show that the president have overriding power in terms of who should be appointed as the INEC chairman. So areas that need amendment in terms of how people assume that office should be the INEC chairman, the INEC commission, national commissioners, and the 36 resident INEC commissioners, because these positions are vital if we must have free, fair, and credible election. As far as I'm concerned, what we need is a democracy that strives on the tenets of democracy, devoid of human interference. I must say very thank you for your time. This is Sat Lavina Namisamat.